right. So let's talk about strain, which is the outcome of stress, right? So there's job related strain, and people who are experiencing job related strain will oftentimes display low satisfaction with their job. They may not be motivated to work or at work. Their performance isn't as effective as it would be if they weren't experiencing job related strain. And they may be absent more often from work, like sort of a withdrawal behavior to protect themselves from a very stressful environment because they maybe are recognizing that they're starting to have the effects of strain. There's emotional strain, which is where a person displays less patience than usual, increased irritability. So you're snapping at your coworker, you're snapping at your kids. You might experience burnout. I talked about before how this is sort of an abstract concept, but a person who's experiencing burnout oftentimes will describe it as emotional exhaustion. Like, I don't have anything left to give, they might say. They may experience depersonalization, where they feel like they're just a cog in a big machine and nobody even cares that I'm an individual, kind of thing. They may have a sense of reduced personal accomplishment. I'm not getting anything done. No one's even going to care. I work at this organization, right? Like, I'm so over this. It doesn't even matter. Physiological strain would be the physical symptoms. So you have more days of actual illness. You're not just calling in to avoid coming to work. You're actually getting sick more often. The person's rubbing her carpal tunnel wrists because the physiological effects of the stress that she's been under has manifested itself in the strain of carpal tunnel disorder. Headaches, irritable bowel syndrome. These are physiological effects that employees sometimes will display when they are under so much stress that they're starting to display physiological strain. So what about managers? We oftentimes talk about sort of the employees, and sometimes the manager is one of the sources of stress for a regular employee, but managers are under stress as well, and it oftentimes is different from the kinds of stress that underlings, people who are not the managers, might be experiencing. So we've got challenge related stress and we've got hindrance related stress. Challenge related stress, which I see I typoed, it shouldn't say challenged, it should just say challenge related. Sorry about that. Results from time pressures that have been imposed by someone else, right? If the manager was in charge of setting the deadline, then the manager would have the power to move that deadline if it wasn't achievable. But if it came from above, that manager is experiencing time pressure, and maybe the manager is having to marshal his direct reports to get this done, and sometimes that can be like herding cats to try and get everybody working and getting this thing done by the deadline, right? So they've got this pressure of knowing there's a deadline, and they may not be able to meet the deadline. There's not a lot they can do about it because these underlings need to do some of the work. Having high levels of responsibility. I mean, a lot of times managers are balancing people's schedules and time, their requests for time off, and the pressures from above and the pressures from below, and they're like in the middle, and everybody's giving them pressure. That kind of level of responsibility can be very stressful. And then job overload, where maybe there's literally too much that has been delegated to this manager that it really cannot be done. Sometimes there's like small finite tasks that have been delegated to a manager, and nobody really noticed that actually there are maybe 2 times during the year where these monthly things, those things all have to be done on a monthly cycle. These need to be done on a quarterly cycle. These need to be done on a biannual, every 6 month cycle. And this one needs to be done once a year. And there's like 1 month when every single one of those things is due at the same time. Like every single one of them is due. So maybe as the year goes on, maybe we don't really experience a ton of job overload, but there are these moments of job overload. I'm going to call that, in the academic world, at least on the quarter system, I'm going to call that spring break, because there's so much that needs to be wrapped up from winter. You have to get your spring stuff ready to go. And then there's always conferences and graduations and all the things that like nominate students for awards. And, the McNair scholars are looking for mentors for summer. And so they're coming to see you, and all the different things are all happening in spring. And so that transition, like from finals week in winter quarter till like the end of the second week of spring quarter, it's job overload. Now, is the job in general overload? Probably not. But there are these moments where the job is overloaded. And so that person during that moment is probably experiencing a lot of stress. Now, there are hindrance related stress that tend to result from constraints that are interfering with the manager's ability to get the job done. So it could be like red tape within the organization where they're like, well, you're gonna have to fill out all these forms, then it has to get all the approvals. And then, once you have all your approvals in place, then you can start. Right. And that's like, okay, so you guys are going to take a month to get through all of this. And I've got a deadline that's in 6 weeks. Like, how are we going to get this done? Politics, you've got other managers that are all competing to maybe get to the next level, or maybe the person who's above the manager is trying to get above that position. And so they're using the manager and their energy to sort of feather their own, little resume. And so the manager is stuck with this person who's trying to grow and develop in the organization at the manager's expense, right? And you have no control over it. So what happens in hindrance related is you got that lack of control, where it's not up to me to decide whether there's red tape. It's not up to me to decide whether I'm in the middle of somebody else's political stuff. I have no control over this. I'm just sort of the pawn. See, I got another group chat request. It's so bizarre. Someone I know got hacked. That's all I can say. Challenge related stress and hindrance related stress both predict the job satisfaction that the manager may be experiencing and whether they are searching for a new job. What we find is that challenge related stressors oftentimes are associated with greater job satisfaction, whereas hindrance related tends to be associated with less job satisfaction. Challenge related stressors oftentimes are associated with a person less likely searching for a new job. So if you have a challenge related job, it seems like that can be energizing and actually help to maintain the manager's optimism and willingness to work in this organization. Hindrance related managerial stress is positively correlated with searching for a new job. And so if this kind of hindrance, like I could do it if you guys hadn't put these roadblocks in front of me, that tends to make a manager think, I'm going to go find some place. It makes them not as satisfied, and it makes them think I'm going to go find some place that doesn't work like this, that will let me do the job that they hired me to do. You may have heard people saying some of the things I'm saying, right? Like I need them to let me do the job they hired me to do. That's a really common phrase that a person utters when they are experiencing hindrance-related stressors. It makes them want to go find another job. All right, so how do we cope with stress? Now, this is good for all of us all the time anyway. So hopefully you've maybe had another class that's talked about coping with stress, but I'm going to try and drill it down into some really key components. So coping is a word that we oftentimes use as shorthand for a variety of different strategies that you can use to try and manage stress. Life is full of stress, so we need a way to cope, right? One way to cope is what we call problem-focused coping, which is where we say, I'm going to try and make this stressor go away. I'm going to actually try and change my behavior or my situation so that this stressor goes away. So let's use the example of you've got a really long commute. Back when I lived on the west side, I had like a 17-mile commute. It wasn't that far, but over the course of the 25 years I was living there, it went from, a 30-minute commute to a 40-minute commute to, by the time I left, I was taking reliably an hour to make that commute for a morning class. Okay, so that's stressful. You're sitting in traffic. You gave yourself 45 minutes to get there, and you are too far away to make it in 45 minutes. And you start to realize this is not going to work. This is very stressful. What am I going to do? And day after day, leave earlier. Next thing you know, you're like, I might as well just stay at the hotel next door because I'm not going to make it. What am I supposed to do? Okay, so problem-focused coping might cause you to think thoughts like, I'll stay at the hotel overnight so I don't have to commute in the morning. Oh, that's probably not going to work. maybe I could find a place to live that is closer to my workplace. Maybe that would be good. Maybe it would be worth paying maybe a little bit more so I could live closer to campus and not have to deal with this twice a day, every day. So that would be a problem-focused strategy. I'm going to try and alter the problem. I will be experiencing less stress if I have a shorter commute. Maybe I can find someone to be my carpool partner so that at least on the parts that have carpool lanes, we could jump in the carpool lane and shorten this trip. That would be possible. Of course, if you find a carpool partner, now we have maybe added stress where maybe they aren't ready when you come to pick them up, or they're not kicking in for their part of the gas, or so there's other stressors that might come with that, but maybe it would be worthwhile because at least it would cause me not to be sitting in the stop traffic, watching people in the carpool lane making progress. So maybe that would be worthwhile. What else can I think of that would actually change? Maybe I'll take the bus. Maybe I can figure out a way to maybe just drive to the, bus transit center and then take the bus to work. And maybe I could even get some work done on that part of it, right? So that might actually be really productive and actually give me back some time in my day. That might work, right? So you think of thoughts like that, like how can I change this situation so that I'm not experiencing this stress? That's what we mean by problem focused. Emotion focused is where I say, okay, I can't change the situation. So what I have to do is figure out a way to change my reaction to the situation, reduce the emotional effects of what is a stress-inducing event that I can't really do anything about. So one thing we might do is like look for the silver lining. Okay, so I have a long commute, but that gives me time to listen to my book on tape. So actually that's kind of fun. I'm actually getting some fiction reading into my day during my commute. That would be a sort of a silver lining thing to think. Maybe we could say, being stuck in traffic, that gives my hair time to air dry, so I don't have to blow dry it, and I'm not damaging my hair. So actually, it's a benefit to me that I'm in the traffic. I'll direct the heating vents or the air conditioned vent towards my head for the entire drive, and by the time I get there, my hair will be dry and my split ends will be a thing of yesterday. So, looking for a way to make it feel less stressful, even though this situation has not actually changed. Turning it around to make it into something positive. The way I described that, doesn't that help to illustrate why optimists might be less prone to the bad effects of stress? Because they figure out the silver lining a little bit more easily than pessimists do. So those are ways that we can cope. What are some of the modern stressors that we're experiencing in the workplace, and maybe some ways to concretely deal with them? One stressor, some people love not having as much supervision and other people do not like it. Sometimes you feel like you're sort of working in a vacuum. You have no feedback. You have no idea whether what you're doing is good or bad, because you don't have a day-by-day supervisor who's noticing what you're doing, commenting on what you're doing, and things like that. So one way to deal with that stressor is to develop your own responsibilities, like set your own list of things to get done each day, and keep yourself working towards your goals. Seek feedback, like deliberately ask, now that we completed this project, what are your pros and cons, or what's your assessment of how I handled it, or what the completion was, or whatever. But be concrete, because a lot of times people are reluctant to give off the cuff kind of feedback. So be really concrete about what you're looking for. And that can help you feel more integrated with other people. I mentioned having a conversation with a colleague, and we started to find out that some of the things that were being stressful for them was being stressful for me also, and neither of us had spoken of it before. I was only motivated to actually bring it up with my colleague because I had a sense that maybe something was wrong, because they had their office door shut and some other little outward signs. And so I asked her about it, and the thing is, we both were having the exact same stressor, and we both thought it was us. And come to find out, no, it was the source of the stress, not us. So, oh my gosh, another group chat. What is going on? Okay, sorry, quite perplexed, very stressful. A team culture can be stressful because now you're dealing with the other humans, right? Because now we're in this culture where you're supposed to get along with your peers. You're supposed to take initiative to determine what your role within this group is going to be. You might have to remind a colleague that they were supposed to have something done by now. That can be really daunting, to have to be the one to remind a colleague. You can't go and ask the supervisor to do it because you may not be having as much supervision as you would have 40 years ago. So one of the ways that you can reduce the stress of this is to accept that empowerment. Recognize that this is actually giving you some freedom and latitude to have things happen the way that you want, to pick what you want to do within a team, and things like that. And it also gives you an opportunity to improve your communication skills. So if you have an interaction with a colleague and you're like, I don't think that went very well, you can read books or practice with friends, or you could do other things to help work on your delivery style and your approach, so that you have a good outcome when you communicate with a colleague. And so that helps you to grow and develop as a person and as a professional. Focus on quality. For a while there was a focus on quantity of work and focus on quantity of acquisitions and things like that. Today, people are starting to turn their attention to wanting quality work and quality acquisitions and stuff. And so there might be higher expectations for an employee today to produce better work than they might have been able to get away with, back in, the 80s. You might have been able to get away with, not so good. But today there's like this focus on quality. So this is an opportunity to grow and develop again, learn on your own how to make better PowerPoints, or learn on your own how to maybe join Toastmasters, so that when you do public speaking, you actually, are confident and good at it. And so, reach out and develop your own skills on your own way. Look for ways to improve your own work. Again, maybe in a vacuum because your supervisor is maybe not there. So these are really like opportunities for personal growth. Downsizing is definitely a 21st century stressor. It's no longer just economically driven because of a recession. Now it's just sort of how the workforce is. I think with rising minimum wages and other things, that's the most expensive thing for any organization is salaries. And so they look for ways to downsize, reduce that expense on employees, and do as much automated things as they can, or other things. So if there's rumors flowing around that there might be some downsizing in the future, one thing that you can do to reduce your stress is to recognize what is a rumor versus what is possibly just like a harbinger of what's coming. So no rumor from a reliable source of information. If you are pretty convinced that this is not a rumor, that this is actual information, you want to be aware, but don't get consumed with it. Instead, if you want to stay with this organization, this is a really good time to prove your worth. Show that you've got good quality work, that, you are a good team player with good communication skills, that you are self-motivated, things like that. And then you're more likely to survive the downsizing. If, on the other hand, you're thinking, well, maybe this is a good time for me to start figuring out what else I'd rather do, start the job search and find something else, right? Like be ready in case. Same kind of advice with mergers and acquisitions. So a lot of organizations are merging with other organizations, and then they let a lot of people go, because when we've merged, we don't need as many employees, right? And so when there's a merger or there's an acquisition, one of the best ways to preserve your job and reduce stress is to find out about the company that just has acquired your company, or that your company has acquired, and know like what their goals are and what kind of employees they tend to like, and be prepared that there's going to be organizational change. And one of the big things that's kind of freeing is to think, do I want to be part of it, or do I want to move on and do something else? So being aware, knowing where this might be pointing, a lot of times the problem with downsizing and mergers and acquisitions is that nobody says things out loud, and so you're doing a lot of guessing. But if you see these things starting to happen, actively search for documentable evidence to help you figure out what decisions to make and to get ready for that change. Diversity. When we're in a diverse workplace, one of the biggest things that people worry about is that they're going to say the wrong thing, and that they're going to either offend their coworker or make their coworker think bad thoughts about them. They just stuck their foot in their mouth, and the coworker is going to think, oh my gosh, so that's what kind of person you are. So one of the best ways to reduce that risk is to do some self-reflection about what your own values are, what pre-existing prejudices you carry. All of us carry prejudices about some type of person. Everybody does. And so being aware of those things rather than just trying to stuff them down and ignore them and act like I'm not the kind of person who has prejudice, makes you less likely to have it accidentally come out, just like blurted out by accident. The other thing that people can do is really think about, this is actually a benefit to have different kinds of people with different ideas. It's not just about how people look, it's about how they think, how they act, and their worldview and the way that they consider things. This is a benefit. And so if we look at it less as a threat and more as a benefit, that will help us also. Being in this international environment where a lot of organizations have, offices in multiple countries, be honest. If somebody says that there might be a chance for you to work overseas, be honest about whether you're willing to do that or not. If you do agree to go to one of the overseas offices, be prepared for the fact that that's going to be stressful for at least like the first 6 months. A lot of people think, a couple of weeks and I'll start figuring it out. No, it's going to be at least 6 months. And it might be even longer because it's difficult to make friends. It's hard to fit in. It's hard to see what's going on. And it can be difficult. And so just being ready for that and being open to it is going to go a long way to reducing the stress. And then innovative pay strategies. No longer are salaries listed as just the money you're going to make. In fact, I was in a fast food restaurant recently and they had a banner on the wall that said that an assistant manager would be making $77,000 in pay and benefits. And so some subset of that is going to be money, but a large subset of that is going to be, for example, the company health plan. Some set of that will be money we'll set aside for you for retirement. A lot of it you're not going to see as actual income. And so you have to figure out how you're being paid, what the actual benefits are. Sometimes they'll ask for, they'll offer like stock options in the organization, things like that. And that's creative, risky, but it's creative. Instead of paying you more, we will give you some number of stocks for every quarter or half year that you're here or something. Could be great. I mean, if you were in on the ground floor on, IBM, I'm sure that was a great deal, those stock options that you got, but I'll bet there were a few years where they weren't worth very much. And so it can be a little risky, but you need to understand what the strategy is. And then the other thing about innovative pay strategies is a lot of times you get those as what they call bonuses. So they won't promise that you're going to get those stock options, or they're not going to promise that you're getting, a stipend of $20,000 at the end of the year. What they're saying is it's a bonus. So if you meet your criteria of whatever's been set for you, then you will get your stock options, or then you will get your $20,000 bonus at the end of the year. If that's the case, it's really wise to reduce your day-to-day stress by saying, can we have periodic performance reviews where you let me know if I'm on track for achieving what needs to be achieved so I get the thing that you offered me. And just like taking control of it will reduce the stress. All right. Now I have a little video queued up for you on emotional competence training, and I think you'll find this really interesting. So I will see you on the next video.